This conversation originally premiered at CFF on Thursday, March 21st, 2024 to a live theater audience. What are you waiting for? It's time to make a micro-budget feature film right now. Get ready to soak up invaluable wisdom from a dynamic group of crafty CFF alumni filmmakers who just did it. Whether you're navigating Canada's grant system or considering raising funds on your own, this episode is a must-listen filled with unconventional tips for anyone who's ready to just dive in and do what it takes to get their film to the finish line. Cheers, Ingrid Veninger, Andrew Chung, Faran Moradi, and Jaqueline de Niverville. Welcome to the fest.
Andrew, writer, director, producer of White Elephant, and Jackie and Faran, writer, director, producer, right? Toronto. So, question, if someone was to ask you, how do you make a micro-budget feature film right now, what would you say? I'm going to start broad and then get specific. What would you say?
Good luck.
Good luck, and... luck's part of it.
Be well. No, I don't know. Broadly, I think focus on unity more than anything, because you cannot make a micro-budget feature unless people are working together. Like, everyone needs to be wearing multiple hats. People's egos need to be checked away. It's not like, for example, on a union production, I think everything is very compartmentalized. Of like, this is my department, this is my duties, whatever. I think you have to... for it to really be successful, all that has to be out the window, so that it's like, oh, there's a light sitting there and we have like 20 minutes to move. Like, I'm going to help you move that light. Like, it doesn't matter. We all need to work together. And similarly, like, if I need help with something, someone will help me. If Jackie needs help with something, like, I'll help Jackie. Other people will help Jackie. Like, it's the same idea that you all need to work together or it's not going to get made.
I just want to follow up on that unity. I think unity is essential to get folks on the same page with your film. Do you work with slide decks? Do you kind of reference comparable films, tones, a palette, a sound, to get everyone on the same page?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, yeah, like discussing similar stories, similar movies with like tones that we're interested in. But yeah, and when we did our scouts too, that was a lot of fun, because we were all collaboratively having conversations about like, where are we going to shoot this from? What's going to be like, what do we want to show that will complement the lights here or complement the wardrobe here? So everyone was kind of working together to inform how everything looked. And obviously that was based on conversations we had before with like a deck and with we did like a Pinterest board with with the wardrobe person. We like went through and like had a Pinterest board and looked at things. But
great. So good luck and unity. Yeah. What would you say, Jackie?
Yeah, I think a united team is pretty accurate. You know, every crew or person that's going to be a part of the film, you know, you want to be very much on the same page about expectations, that this is micro budget, and that's kind of the approach that needs to be had all across the board. And I think, yeah, go into it, you know, everyone knows they're going to be working super hard, and everyone knows that what they're going to make, you know, who knows where it's going to go. But everyone just kind of has to be, you know, in the same mindset about that. You know, you don't want to bring in a first AC from the union, or, you know, you want to find people that share a kind of common philosophy about that same kind of teamwork thing you were talking about. I think that's super important.
I guess I'll ask the same question, and then I'm going to dig a little deeper.
Sure. If I was doing it today, this is going to be weird advice, but like, it's only because I'm getting older. like I would actually try to get myself in good health before going into a film, right? Like, because the fatigue, the stress, like I would condition myself like I would like I'm getting ready for a marathon, right? Like I'd be working out every day, I'd be like running every day before it starts, because it does a number on your body, like doing something micro budget, because you're doing so much. So related to that, my other piece of advice is that expect to do more than you think you're going to do. Like, I think I was very, you know, ignorance helps. Like you go in and think, I can do this. This is easy, right? Like, it's not a problem. I've done this before. It's just like a longer shoot than my shorts, right? And then you go into it and you're like, I'm doing literally like 10 positions at once. And I didn't necessarily expect that. But when you're working at such a low budget level, you're just forced to, like you said, like you have to help each other out, right? So
Yeah, so let's define micro budget, because sometimes what's micro budget for me, someone will say, "Oh, I have $250,000. It's such a low budget." I'm like, "Whoa, $250,000 is a lot." So what is a micro budget? And like, first of all, what is a micro budget in your mind? And then I'm going to ask you what the budget of your film was. But what is a micro budget?
Ooh, I would say micro budget under 200,000.
That's micro.
Yeah. Well, micro.
See,
It's a
for me,
wide
that's a
range.
low budget. I think of a micro budget, if I'm really getting real, is under $10,000.
Whoa.
Wow.
That to me is a micro budget.
That's like
It's-
microscopic budget.
Well, okay, but Andrew is like, I agree, right? Okay, so let's get into it. We've just seen your trailer. There's a lot of cast, there's locations. How was that money raised?
30% was from private investor. I think 10% was from a fund, and the other, 60% was me.
So how did you come into contact with the private investor, and what was the fund?
The private investor was a friend of mine that I had, when I was starting out, I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial events. And then, so I was just meeting people who had startup businesses that had the same motivation and with their own personal businesses as much as I did as a filmmaker. And initially I went into those events just trying to get clients, like corporate clients, to shoot like commercials for them and that kind of thing. And then so I met a lot of like investors at the same time, right? Like just people that are just willing to take risks. They're just like, oh, that's cool. I love art. I love film. I have nothing to do with it, but hey, keep me posted on what you're doing. So I kind of did that with one of my friends, and then he was like, I really love what you do and stand for, because like I was all about the whole representation thing, and he really believed in that as well. So my first short, he invested money in that. So he was like, I'll throw you some money, like because when I told him the budgets that we work with, I'm like, oh, that's nothing, right? Like so he did that. So I made that short, and then probably like it was about 5 years later, I was producing this, and I needed more money. I had written a script that I was like, I don't have enough money to make this. So then I was like, can you read the script and just tell me if you can throw me something, right? And then it's funny because it actually wasn't intended as a feature. It was intended as a short. When he read it, it was a short, and then he said, if you turn this into a feature, I'll put money in it for you. So I expanded it into, as far as I could. It's a shorter feature. It's almost mid-length, right? So as far as I could take it, and then he invested. At the time, it was 50%. But now, as I keep paying for things, I've paid more than 50% now. So yeah.
Yeah, we're going to also get into sort of the ongoing costs that continue beyond wrap and completing the film. But thank you for that. Curious how you two met as a producer, writer, director. How did the relationship start? And then also, what was the budget of your film, and how did you raise the money?
We met through a mutual friend, a makeup artist that I'd worked with on a long-form TV series. And you were looking for a producer. You had applied to the Telefilm Talent to Watch program, I think, with a different producer, but who had to step away. So you're looking, because you got the grant, you were looking for someone to step in and kind of, see this project through. So she connected us, we met, and just hit it off and decided to do it. Yeah. So we didn't meet in any other friend capacity prior. It was very much like the project became the impetus. Yeah. Anything to add?
Jackie's first contribution to the film was very reminiscent of like, what's that, like the Napster guy was his name?
Oh, like the Facebook?
Yeah. He's like, oh, drop the original title for the film was Once Upon a Time in Tehranto, and Jackie was like, just call it Tehranto. And it was like much cleaner.
Yes.
So, big fan of that, Jane.
Yeah, that was my Zuckerberg moment.
So you had the Talent to Watch money.
Yes. Yeah.
It was like half the budget-ish.
I knew that was going to get us to the end of camera, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And then post was an unknown.
Kind of an unknown. I think we had planned some small amounts set out for post. That was in there, but it wasn't really going to be the finish line for sure.
Would you ever do that again?
Probably not.
Yeah. I've done that once and I was like, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
But it's exciting because were you able to show people a rough cut and then try to get money on the back of that?
I think for the Kickstarter Indiegogo, we did have a lot of materials to show people of like what this is going to be, what this looks like so far, you know, what are you investing in? I think that was helpful. Yeah.
If I can just add one thing.
Yeah.
I would totally do it again. Just because, like, and we actually had a conversation at one point where we were in our last block of shooting where we ran out of money. And we were like, the only money we had left was earmarked for post. And I was like, let's just shoot it with that money and then we'll figure out post later. And it was scary, but at least we had it on a hard drive. So that was, and then from there, like, we figured out other things. I cut the film instead of hiring an editor. I was editing full time at the time, so I had an editing background, but I had to take a months long, like, 6 months? I took a break from it because I was like, I need to come at this with fresh eyes. And I'm glad I did, because there's whole scenes that we cut out of the film that I don't know if I could have otherwise.
I mean, it's a tricky thing. It's like with micro budget, there is a sort of empowering feeling of, I'm going to do this by whatever means necessary, to steal from Spike Lee, but by whatever means necessary. And then you know your cash, or you know the funds are going to take you this far, but you're happy for that because it's so much better than having never started. But then you're also very vulnerable because you can't actually finish without additional resources. So sometimes there is this lag of time, which can be a gift, but I just hated being that vulnerable. So now I sort of feel like I got to have enough on my credit cards to see it through, or something, as opposed to being dependent on an outside source. So you got the Kickstarter Indiegogo money, and then what closed it out to get all the way through?
I think right when we were getting back into editing was when COVID happened, just around that time, or shortly, around then. And Telefilm opened up a new program basically to try and support projects through COVID. Because our whole post-production process kind of got thrown for a loop. In a lot of the ways we were going to do it, we had a lot of kind of in-kind support from a lot of Faran's connections at his editing job, just for post-sound, post-super support. And so we applied for that program to kind of assist that post-COVID, new workflow, and we got it. And so that was able to kind of carry us through that last little portion of post.
So we need money. We also like to use your unity word. We really need people. Mm-hmm. So much of making work is collaborative and dependent on relationships. So Andrew, I want to ask you, what is, beyond maybe the investor who went from your short to the feature, what are some of the key relationships and or mentors that you have that have enabled you to make your work?
It's always been the DP for me. Like they decide, it's kind of like if I have one, then I can make it most of the time. And of course, like having an investor, like the last 2-3 films, like I historically don't get grants or I don't apply for them. So I have only gotten private investment from all my past few films, and some of them were just fellow filmmakers, or I had an actor who helped fund one of my films, and then usually I finance like half of it myself. But I usually treat myself as a fund. like I kind of manage my money in a way that I have an account that I build money into, like this is going towards my next film. I haven't done that lately because I had a kid and then changes everything, right? but when I was like a single guy, like I was like, I'm just, this money on the side goes to films, right? There's no room for that anymore, right? But that's how I kind of did that. But yeah, so it was obviously myself for the funding part, and always had like an investor who would at least put in about 30% of the budget. And then the DP would be the one who would donate their time and their gear. That's like a huge factor, right? They donate their time and gear, and then I'm ready to go. And then everything else I could kind of piece together.
So the never spend your own money on your own film never washed with you?
I actually still agree with that. I still agree that you shouldn't use your own money, right? Like like find the money anywhere else you can. And the reason I felt like I had to was because there was literally no other option. So my options were be a filmmaker or don't be one, That's it, right?
See, I always felt like if I was ever to expect anyone to give me money for my work, I should be on the front lines of that, even though it's blood, sweat, equity, time, everything. Also be on the front lines of I'm going to put my money down as well.
I totally agree with that. And I think it's the same principle with business, right? Like even on Dragon's Den, like they'll tell you, if you don't have any skin in the game, they're not going to invest in it, right? So it's like, I know that I have to contribute something, right? You contribute a certain percentage, and then you can try to get an investor to say, hey, can you just put in some money, right? So I would never say like you shouldn't expect to not spend a dime. Like you should have some skin in the game, right? Like you should be spending something. Otherwise, the people are going to look at you and be like, well, if you don't even care enough to put in some money, why should I? Right.
How does that vibe with you? Are you putting your own money or never putting your own money? And also the relationship question. What are some of the key relationships that you've had?
Yeah, I definitely put in my own money like all the time. I mean, Jackie and I both did.
It's ongoing.
Yeah, ongoing. Yeah, I don't know. I think I agree, and I don't look at it I don't have like a rigid way of being like, I'm going to put X percentage and like balance these books or whatever. It's more like, oh, we don't have money for this. Okay, here's like, I'm just going to put it on my credit card. Like, it's just like in the moment, you're like, I need to get this done. I'm going to put it on my credit card. I'm going to do this. Money comes and goes. I'll figure it out later. If I need to like, I'm a capable person. If I need to go grab like, I don't know, multiple shifts at like a Starbucks and like somewhere else, like I'll do what I have to do. So yeah, when you're in it, you're like, it's either I'm a filmmaker, I'm not, right? And then in terms of relationships, yeah, I would say like all your key creatives, like your DP, your composer, your production designer, like those are all integral to making sure that you have a vision. Also, competent sound department, because you can watch a movie that's like kind of dark, but I don't think you can make it through watching a movie that has kind of okay sound. Like it is grating to your ears. And actually the other relationship that proved integral to our film was the locations. Like how many locations do you think we had? Like 20? 25 locations. And there was like one day where we shot, I think like 5 locations, like 3 of them were exteriors, but like those are all moves. And if those restaurants and cafes and stuff that we shot at weren't helping us in some way, it wouldn't have gotten made. So that was make or break for us, I think.
What's your proudest producer moment on the film?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I think
Besides the title, because that is a really good contribution from the get-go.
Thank you. I think when we got to do our screening in LA, which meant that, but if we had made it that far, we had acquired an American distributor for a Canadian movie, which was so out of our realm of possibility at the beginning, just in our imaginations. And it held over in theaters, which is great. So I think if, by the time we were there, I was kind of taking in all of that. And the screening itself was like very enmeshed in the Iranian community of LA, which was so different than here. And I think it was really cool to just kind of be enmeshed in that and see and have the movie be promoted in a completely kind of new niche environment, but also was so like relatable to that community as it is here. So that was really, really special.
Oftentimes we hear this, good, fast, cheap, pick 2. And we're always going for all 3, right? And I know for myself working on, I would say, Microbudget, talking to 2 writers here, writer-directors, I never let myself write anything I can't resource. So I'm writing specifically for locations I can access, for people that are sometimes in my immediate family or actors that I know, props, sets, transport, food, everything. I'm thinking, I'm not going to let myself write a camera on a dolly because it's going to be a handheld camera 100% of the time. Do you write to scale so that you can do good, fast, cheap within your resources? Do you put limitations on the creative process from the beginning as a low budget or micro budget filmmaker?
For my short films, I did. For the next film that I'm currently working on, I did.
How did you?
Just knowing like, it's a limited budget. And for example, if you're booking lights, right, like from rental houses and stuff, like you have to pay for it, right? So if you're not getting enough lights to light an entire space that you want to block your actors in, you have now stunted your blocking because you can't have your actors move too far out of the light because now they're in the dark. It doesn't look as good, all this stuff, right? So that was a lesson learned on Toronto, where we were like, we had just enough money to get certain gear, but not enough to like do what we wanted. And so for this next film that I'm working on, it's all like, it's almost entirely natural light. And like outside, and when it is inside, it's like next to it's like written to be beside a window, so that there's no longer issues with like, oh, they go here, they go there, they do this, the camera's over here now, it's over there, because it's the amount of times that we were shackled just by having just enough to get something but not enough to do everything. So yeah, trying to write it cheaper. And I will say, when writing Toronto, I took some gambles with things that I was like, oh, I don't know the person who owns this restaurant, but if I can find a few restaurant owners who are committed to wanting to help like young Iranians in the community make something, then we can make it. And thankfully, through conversations that Jackie and I had with people, they pulled through. Like one of the locations was a banquet hall, and they would usually book the space for weddings for like $30,000 to $60,000. We shot there for one whole day plus a night shoot the night before and a pickup day the week after. They did all the they set it up for us, and they did the tear down, and they fed the crew with their food that they normally feed to weddings and stuff. We got the whole thing for $2,400. So
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is locations. Like that's the thing I'm always conscious about when I'm writing. It's like if I always ask myself, can I feasibly get this location? And if the answer is yes, then I write it in. But like I know the number one things you always look at is locations and cast. Cast is something I don't really look at because I think because I was naive in my very first project, which was a web series. It was like an ensemble cast, tons of actors. Because I went through that, like I'm pretty confident that like I could work with any amount of cast that I have in my script. So I never restrict myself when it comes to like the amount of characters, but I do restrict myself when it comes to locations, for sure.
So many questions. I will open it up, so do have your questions ready. But I think oftentimes when we talk about, making low budget films with lots of restrictions, we focus on where the idea came from and the production. I really want to talk about marketing and distribution. It's festivals like this that help bring an audience and build awareness, but the festival run, the getting distribution, the getting sales, the cost that takes, the time that takes. Give us a little bit of a sense of festival premiere and then beyond. What are the plans to get this film to maximize the potential of your feature now in order to build the next one?
Well, it's funny because I think our sales were quite separate from some of the festival life that our movie had. So it's...
Premiere
here was at Canadian Film Fest.
Right on.
And I think, that just made a lot of sense to us, and I think it suited, it just felt like a good home. And in the States, it was CineQuest, which is kind of like a indie festival that takes place in San Diego. It was also still a bit of COVID times. I think that was maybe early 2022 that was all starting to kick off festival-wise. Festivals, it was a bit hit or miss sometimes. Like, you don't really always know what is gained when you go there. Sometimes it can really feel like, oh, I made a lot of connections, like I have something tangible when I'm walking out of here. And other times you'd travel and then you'd be like, okay, well, where did this really go? Where did this really take me? What is going to be the result of me, spending the money to try and get out here? It's kind of hard to say sometimes, because I think, our American sale came through a relationship from one of our executive producers on the project, who's kind of been a mentor in a lot of ways. So that was something completely unrelated to the festival run in the States.
And how much would you say you spent on festival submissions or?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
1,000?
No, more than that.
More than 1,000?
Thousands.
Thousands.
I would say so.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
that was an area where Jackie and I were putting in our own money.
Yeah, that was our own money.
Yeah,
sure.
we don't often that isn't really shared. That it really does. It's a whole can be a racket as well.
Yeah.
So festival kind of goals and distribution sales.
The festivals I spend a lot of money on festival fees as well.
More than 1,000?
Yeah, way more. And we didn't get into a ton of festivals, to be honest. Like, we got into a lot of festivals in Canada, but outside of Canada, very, very hard.
How did you navigate that disappointment?
I'm just used to it.
You're used to it.
I'm used to getting disappointed. That's my status quo state. Like,
do you just go, okay, on to the next one?
Like, it's just like, okay, yeah, like it's unusual when I get an acceptance. I'm like, oh, this is weird, right? So yeah, I'm just used to it. Like, I don't think it takes a while to get used to it. Yeah. Like, I've made a number of films. Like, I remember the first few projects I made, it was like there was a lot of anger and like denial and like just like I suck at this and it's like I shouldn't be doing this, but like at some point you just keep doing it and then you're just like you just reach a point that, oh, whatever, and then you just move on, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. But in terms of distribution, like it was the festivals that really made the difference. Like if I didn't get into those few festivals that I got into, I wouldn't have made any sales, I don't think, right? It was Festival Real World. I met like programmers there because they facilitated like meetings with programmers there, and the other one was actually through my team. Actually through my lead. My lead knew a programmer at a festival in the U.S. which we had gotten rejected by already, and I told her we already submitted to this, like they rejected it, right? And then because she had a close friend who was on the programming team that was not there the previous year, she said send it again, she's going to look at it, and then we got into the festival that year, the following year, after getting rejected, which is very unusual. That does not happen, right? So because we got screened at that US festival, which I think was the only US festival that we played at,
and it was called
CAMFest.
Yeah.
So it's the Asian American Festival in San Francisco. It's the largest Asian American festival in the US. So we played there, and that led to a broadcaster called Fuse in America. They caught wind of it from that festival, and so they approached me to license it, right? So that was just serendipitous, and I was lucky, right? So that's how we made our US sale.
How do you pay your bills? Because clearly for many of us, our films are not paying our bills. What's your side hustle?
I teach, like you, Ingrid. Teaching saved my life, I'll be honest with you, right? Like, if I didn't have it, I can't work in this industry at all, right? Like, so like, you know, a buddy of mine just asked me, hey, you want to teach? Because a teaching position opened up. This was 8 years ago. And then I've been teaching ever since. And
where do you teach?
I teach at the Toronto Film School, was where I started teaching. I currently teach at George Brown College, and I teach at Conestoga College in Kitchener. So right. I teach script, I teach film production. I literally just came from class, like on my way here. I had to leave early to come here, but yeah.
Are your students in the house?
I know.
Where are your students?
But you know, like they're so I can't. I don't even want to get into the students.
I know.
You should know.
Sidebar.
You should know students well.
How do you pay your food and rent?
I mainly work in commercials. I started as a production coordinator, and now I'm a producer, mainly working for one or two companies that kind of understand that I might dip out for a few months and then come back. And luckily, they still call me after that. So, yeah, that's what I do for the most part. Like almost, 8 to 10 months out of the year. And I kind of break up my year that way. It's like 2 months, I assume, is just going to be spent doing independent stuff. And then, I don't know, that's kind of how I've planned it out.
A lot of little things and like some big things. So like I'll go through like a 1 year period, 2 year period. We'll just do like tons of corporate stuff. And it's nice too, because it's nice to do it once in a while, because I'm putting my hands on gear. I'm like actively shooting, putting up lights, cutting. I don't like advertise it, because sometimes you go to a production company and they're like, well, this guy does corporate videos, we don't want him for our show or whatever. But the nice thing is, when I'm on set, I can speak the language of the crew, right? So for that, it's really useful. And then I'll also do like speaking engagements. Those are great. Cover like 3 weeks worth of groceries with a speaking engagement if you know how to cook your own food, so that's great. And I'm also a director for hire on like TV. I just wrapped on a show called Wordsville. Before that, I did a show called Dino Dex. Before that, Holly Hobby. So directing TV stuff, yeah. So that largely pays the bills, and then once in a while I'll get like a development grant or something like that, and that'll help cover my food while I can continue to write. Like I'm going to Nova Scotia tomorrow. That was paid for by some telefilm money.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your films. I really think they're really great features, so congratulations, truly. I'm going to open it up to the house to see if there are any questions. Question over here, yes. Hey, my student. Woo! Great. So the question from Natasha is, do you think that making micro-budget, low-budget films is sustainable? Not, just to live, but also to pay your cast and your crew in a decent way. Can you make it work?
I think the way that I would look at it is less like, oh, this is an investment for me to make money once the movie sells, because the reality is micro-budget films don't turn a profit. So like you're still going to be in the hole even once you sell it. But the way to look at it more is like, this is an investment for my career, right? Because like had I not directed on Toronto for like no money, like I got less money out of it than what I put into it, right? And it's probably the same for you, right? But because of that, I was then able to go and direct on Odd Squad and Holly Hobby and all these other shows. And from there, I was able to earn a living. So in one way, it's kind of like, okay, well, I was able to earn a living because of it, but I didn't earn a sustainable living on it, if that makes sense.
I think it is possible, definitely. I think it depends, how you approach writing the script. If it's something approachable and something you feel is actually doable for the amount of budget that you've kind of saved up for, or if you're able to apply for a grant and get the grant, I think it's very much possible and sustainable to pay people living wages. Like I think that's in a lot of ways what the grant system has done is allow for that. In a lot, sometimes when it's such a small budget, you don't want to sacrifice that. So I totally understand.
At the budget that I worked at, it's not sustainable. I would not do it again, right? That was a lesson for me, right? I think maybe the budget that Toronto was at is probably something that is, everybody could work at a living wage and, it's reasonable. But I think like, I paid my crew too, but I don't think it was a wage that was productive, right? Like I don't think it was, in some ways, not entirely fair. So I would not do it again. But yeah, I agree that you make a film to invest in your career. It's not about like turning a profit, because it's very unlikely. Like, I think the best you can ask for is to break even. Like I was fairly close to breaking even, but I did not turn a profit. So you're not making money off of it. But if I did not do it, it would not open up all these other opportunities for me. Right. So like I did open up opportunities for me. I didn't mention, but like my teaching isn't the only thing I do. Like I freelance as well, just like Faran. So I picked up writing gigs as a result of doing the film, because they saw my film and they're like, hey, you want to join our writer's room to do this? So it helps you in the long term. So you don't look at it as like, does this thing help, right? The other thing I'd say too is that like, I know we have to think about the money, but like when it comes to making films, I feel like your thought process shouldn't be like, is this a calling card? Or at least it isn't for me. Mine is always like, I just want to make a film. Like I want to tell a story, right? If that's your motivation, then I don't think your mind is not going to be set on like, is this giving something to me? Because the film itself is the thing that gives to you, right? Nothing else. Not the money, not like the opportunities it's going to create for you. That's why I find it funny when people say like, oh, this will work as a great calling card for you. But I'm like, this is the calling card. This is the thing this is the dream. Making this movie is the dream, not the future of it, right? So.
Yeah, Faran, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what you both said about paying your crew. We were able to pay our crew, thankfully, not as much as we would have liked. We didn't really get paid anything, but I think that's kind of how you have to approach it. And one thing that I will say is that I think the way that most of the unions approach indie filmmaking is excellent. because they give a proper avenue where people can negotiate their own rates, whatever they want. It's understood. It's like transparent. Like DGC, I can go and negotiate getting paid like 25 cents if I want.
You get dispensation.
You get dispensation, as long as that the production company hasn't been like put on a no list. You can do it.
Okay. A question here. Yeah. The question was, if you work with the DGC and IATSE or NABET, do you have to work with ACTRA? No, they're separate guilds, separate unions. But did you go with ACTRA?
We did. It was a bit tricky because I think half of our cast was non-union because they hadn't had the experience yet in the union. Like a lot of our cast were newer actors, and the actor roster for Iranian performers was just small, to be honest. Like we wanted it to also be authentic, so we did end up going actor in the end, but we had to permit a lot of people, and it was a lot of permit fees.
How much in permit fees would you say?
$200 a week per person.
Right.
And then if they're back for another week, you have to get another permit for them.
So it just means that if you audition ACTRA members and there's no one in the union that can do the role, then you can get a non-union member, but you have to permit them. And it has to be vetted by ACTRA. They have to give you permission to do that. It's not an automatic yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, we probably spent a couple $1,000 on permit fees total.
No, we didn't use ACTRA. It was non-union, and partly because we couldn't afford it. Like, it would blow up the costs for sure. And it took place in a high school, so it's like you have a lot of background, and when you have a lot of background, we couldn't blow up the costs with it being union. So yeah.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. All right, so the timing of what was the sort of strategy to go festival into, any kind of distribution to streaming online or putting it on Vimeo VOD or whatever? How do you plan that out?
I mean, I didn't know. I was like winging some of it. Like I learned on the way, right? I think I even got some advice from Warren, right. But I mean, I learned afterwards that you should like look for a distributor before you have your premiere. Right. Like that's a piece of information that like wasn't told to me, right? But I found out from other filmmakers, right? Like seek your distributor as soon as you get your premiere acceptance, and then before it gets actually screens, try to land it beforehand. But after the value of your film deteriorates as time goes on from that point. So it's a race, right? Like you have to get it to people and get them to look at it and try to build buzz with your festival as much as you can. But if you're not getting into festivals, that makes it 10 times harder. Then you have to try other means. But luckily we were getting into a few festivals that kind of like built some momentum for us, and we won some awards at the festivals as well. So that helped a lot. And then from there it was it's just a race. Just try to get a deal made as soon as possible, right? And then I just kept like, you just hit the pavement with just like trying to pound people with like, watch my film, like all the distributors, all the agents, right? Like.
Yeah, and I would say honestly, in this era of abundance, we have so many films. You see the numbers from festivals. It's so competitive, and then it's so much based on relationship and kind of like, horse trading. I don't think there's any shame in you make the films, maybe you don't get distribution, you don't get a sales agent, we are still empowered now more than ever to have our work meet an audience on platforms that we can have some agency over. And there's no shame in that. So I think that whatever you make, just follow through on, give it a window to get out there by whatever industry means, but otherwise take control back. Don't wait for any gatekeepers to say, I curate your film and you are blessed to play wherever, and get your film out there and then on to the next one. Because when I'm looking at emerging filmmakers, I'm wanting to see what they've done and I want access to that. So make it accessible. Does that make sense, or do you feel more protective about your work that you wouldn't do that?
I'm glad you said that, because I didn't land an agent. I didn't land a distributor, right? So I made all those sales by myself, right? I mean, I was lucky that I had experience in distribution, which is actually how I know Ingrid. I don't know if you remember, because I worked for Horizon Motion Pictures, which represented only.
Oh, wow,
right? So
wow.
that's where I learned everything about distribution. I understood everything about the markets and how the contracts look, what are the commissions like. So I knew that side of the business, so that by the time I made films and had to sell my own, I knew how to approach those negotiations, and I knew what numbers looked favorable and what were reasonable and what were not. Right? So that helped me a ton, so that I was able to be my own distributor, But it wasn't that I didn't look for an agent. I did, right? But I didn't stop there, right? They all said no, and then I said, okay, I'm just gonna sell it myself.
I think we also winged it a bit. I don't know if we really thought too much about how that momentum should carry through. I don't know if we really had that awareness and knowledge yet about how ideally, you want these things to come out in a timely way where you're progressively building buzz and PR and marketing kind of up until a theatrical release, ideally. But I think what our timing was is we had premiered at Canadian Film Fest in the spring, and then we were in theaters in Canada in November of the same year. So, and I think that worked out. That's kind of, when I look back, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. But I don't think we were that planned out about it initially.
And we got our distributor, I think, like within the same week that we found out that we got in to CFF, right?
And did you work with a publicist?
I think they had like
they had one.
Yeah, they had.
Yeah, because that's a key component, I think, too.
Angie, she's great.
Oh, Angie is great.
Can you please, because we have a room full of filmmakers, some of them want to make their first feature, and there's all these obstacles, there's all these excuses not to do it. Can you just please talk about your 1K Wave project, just so people know it can be done?
Yeah. Just so super quick, I think it was a time when a lot of my friends were not getting funding. And I got a $5,000 check, an award from the Toronto Film Critics Association. So I had this $5,000, and I thought, I want to give that back to the community. And so I just put a challenge. No excuses now. Like, we all have phones, we all have networks, we can make films. I really just believe that if you've got a story to tell, maybe you need to bring the scale down, but nothing is stopping you from making your film. Absolutely nothing. So the challenge was for $1,000 from, conceit to completion, in 3 months, from conceit to completion. So there was a financial restriction, there was a time restriction, and what Stacey Donan and I, who I partnered with, brought to the table was a premiere date at the Royal. So there was an exhibition confirmed in a big cinema. And we had like 48 people step up to the challenge. All kinds of different projects, all kinds, from doc, from fiction, from hybrid, from no animation though. And then we were able to do 5, and 4 of them were completed. Interestingly, the filmmaker who was the most experienced, who had made 5 features or so prior, was the only one that could not get through the challenge. And it was primarily because everyone wanted to shadow be on this set. And so they ended up with like a 25-person crew, and those people had to be fed. Those people had to be transported. There weren't, like, everyone had to be communicated with, and it just got too big. It ballooned out because everyone wanted to help on the project. And then there was a big cast. The cast was like 25 people, everyone volunteering, but it just ballooned out, and it just collapsed on itself. But the amazing thing was we screened the 4 features, and then this filmmaker talked about what he called a train wreck. He came and talked about it really, really transparently. It was one of the best gifts. So it is hard. No one says it's easy, but passion can go a really long way. And I really do believe that if you have $1,000 or can get $1,000 and pool your friends together and write something that is to scale with the resources you have within a certain time frame, so you've got that deadline on the horizon, and you just commit to, I'll tell you something, sometimes I pay my crew in advance. So I give everybody $1,000, and if I don't start shooting on this date that I promise I will, they get to keep the money. And believe me, it lights a fire under your ass. So set a premiere date at a friend's house, and make it happen. Just no excuses. Final word, thank you for asking that. What are you working on next, and who is a source of inspiration? Like, you look at a filmmaker, or you look at a film, you go, I wish I freaking made that. What inspires you? Next project and inspiration.
There's 2 projects kind of out right now, and it's just a matter of which one's going to go to camera first. One's a lo-fi American project. It's about this widowed father who gets lost at sea, and the only thing that he has to call for help is this stolen ham radio that he confiscated from his 8-year-old daughter before the trip. He turns it on and he sends out his SOS message, and the only person to hear it is this lone astronaut on the International Space Station. So every like couple hours, she contacts him again, and then they try to figure out where he is, how to get home before he gets hit with too many waves over and over and over. The other project is called Cry Wolf. That one, hoping to shoot it in the East Coast, which is why I'm going tomorrow. And that is about a Iranian father and son who have both experienced a lot of trauma in their personal lives, and it's all about how toxic stoicism, especially within relationships of fathers and sons, is cyclical, and it can lead to ill-equipped fathers raising ill-equipped sons who then are really bad in relationships, or they're bad as fathers, they're bad in their own families, and they're like emotionally stunted. And so how do we overcome that? And we touch on themes of teen suicide, and also on how stillbirth and miscarriage can negatively impact relationships. So trying to touch on a bunch of different taboo topics to try to normalize these and encourage conversations. And then inspirational filmmaker, I don't know, it's hard to pick one. There's so many.
Does someone come to mind though, right in the immediate moment?
I don't know. I'm going to throw George Lucas out there, only because Star Wars was what made me want to become a filmmaker, and he started as like an indie underground filmmaker.
There you go. Yeah.
Right now, I'm working on an indie horror feature. We're going to shoot in June outside Calgary, directed by Avalon Fast. Also about themes of trauma, but I think it gets kind of translated into this world of female horror, culty summer camp. Basically, when so much happens to you, you have nowhere to turn, just to utter evil. It's the only option. That is the ethos of the film. I think inspiration, watching a lot of documentaries lately, and I want to make more documentaries. What I watched recently was Kirsten Johnson's Camera Person, which I really loved. Yeah.
Beautiful. Can I just ask you, because I know we have some horror, like some genre makers. Would you be open to people approaching you as a producer with
for sure.
potential ideas? And,
definitely genre.
Pitch,
and documentary.
Okay, great. Andrew, final words.
Projects I'm working on, I've taken a break from directing, to be honest. And it was also because I had a baby, and it just changed my life in a lot of different ways. It makes it very difficult to have a erratic schedule that directing often being on set does. So I needed a routine. So I've been working on my writing for the past few years. So I'm developing a TV series right now. It's a love story that happens. Half of it happens on the astral plane. So it's kind of this spiritual / love story that I kind of say that it's a love story for those who don't believe in love, I say. I'm in negotiations with a couple of production companies in the city not in the city, one's in Quebec, but I can't really talk about more, but we're getting close to a deal, and hopefully that there's some traction there that we can move forward with it. And the other project is just I'm writing a horror feature with a writing partner of mine, and which is I can't even talk, like it's very complex and weird, and I don't even know how to. We don't have even a log line that I can pitch to you yet. So, but I'm excited about that one too. So,
an inspiration.
Yeah, same thing. Like it's very hard. Like I have lots of inspirations, but I David Fincher was the one who got me into filmmaking. I don't make films anything like his, but he's one of my favorite filmmakers. I love Donald Glover. Like I think everything he does is like amazing, and so he's kind of I think an influence on me. I'm not sure if it's coming out, but yeah. Last film I saw was The Audition, which was like while I was writing my horror feature, that I was like watching some like horror stuff, and that like is a messed up film, but very good. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you all for being here. Make your movies, tell your stories, be unstoppable.
Thank you, Ingrid, Andrew, Faran, and Jaqueline, for this candid conversation. If you're listening, I hope you feel inspired to turn your ideas into a micro-budget feature film right now. I know I do after listening to this resourceful and hardworking, passionate group. This chat was produced by Jen Pogue, Ashley Rains, and Bern Euler for the Canadian Film Fest. Music by Brett Higgins. The Cheers and Chats podcast is co-produced, edited, and sound mixed by Ryan Gordon. For more info on the fun happening now at CFF, find us at canadianfilmfest.ca.